Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Flashpoint Beyond, which low-key is a time crisis. So for the first part of this video, we're gonna do a bit of crisis talk, as well as visit some moments that take place before issue 0. But on top of that, this is a pretty iconic moment, with Geoff Johns revealing the real Joker's real name, which falls in line with what we'd seen in 3 Jokers. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so initially when we jump in, we start off with Bonnie Baxter and Mr. Terrific doing an interview with Angela Chen, which on the surface is the two of them explaining to the world the significance of the different Crisis events a couple days after the conclusion of Dark Crisis. But really with how this is done, it's given to us like a discussion / explanation of the matters that deal with the Omniverse and how that's only half the equation. Because initially, Mr. Terrific, who we're also reminded that he's the 3rd smartest man on Earth in the DC universe, but when we jump in, he's telling the world about Dark Crisis, which at this point on Prime Earth had ended a couple days ago. But at this point, we find him explaining to Angela and the rest of the world, on one hand, how this was nearly the end of everything, again. But more specifically in this conversation, he's teaching Miss Chen and the viewers who are watching about the Great Darkness. And not so much in the sense that it's anything new, because it's been around in DC Comics since the mid-80s, but instead Mr. Terrific is informing the world about the details that they otherwise just wouldn't know, aside from the events that actually take place on Earth. But throughout this conversation, he tells the world how the Great Darkness is an ancient living corruption that can infect and control sentient life, and how when unleashed into the Omniverse, it nearly destroyed it, to where then Mr. Terrific goes on to explain how the Omniverse is everything and everything matters, only for Bonnie Baxter to then cut in and correct him by saying that the Omniverse isn't everything, because the Omniverse is all space, but space is only half of existence, and the other half is time. And she goes on to say that yes, she agrees that the Omniverse has been the focus of every crisis that we've seen, that have been perpetuated by the great evils of this dark age. Evils like the Anti-Monitor, Alexander Luthor, Superboy Prime, Darkseid, the Batman Who Laughs, and more recently in Dark Crisis, Pariah, and the Great Darkness. But aside from every crisis that we've seen that threaten the multiverse and the infinite Earths, Bonnie Baxter is expressing that as huge as these events have been, threatening the Omniverse, or otherwise all of space, that again this is only half of existence, and the other half of existence, aside from space, would be time. And she goes on to say that the Omniverse and its multiverses are conceptual in nature, while hypertime is emotional, because hypertime is never stagnant. It's constantly reacting to decisions that are made, which cause it to grow and split up into an endless number of timelines. And when these new timelines are created within hypertime, unlike parallel Earths that'll come and go, alternate timelines exist forever. And Bonnie goes on to say that hypertime can be unpredictable and violent, and it remains unexplored, but it's for these reasons that the Time Masters are necessary. But it's with saying this where Angela Chen chimes in, and she mentions that Mr. Terrific and a number of others have described the Time Masters to be a bit reckless, and Professor Martin Stein, one half of Firestorm, he's claimed that the Time Masters were behind 0 Hour, which altered people's memories all around the globe. And I'm glad that Angela mentioned this, because I want to say just for a second here, if we're talking about Crisis and them only affecting the Omniverse, I'm glad that somebody mentioned 0 Hour, which was, quote, a crisis in time. And not because it takes away from anything that Bonnie Baxter had said, but rather because it supports her argument, with 0 Hour being the first crisis in time. But just after this, Bonnie Baxter, she deflects the accusations that Angela Chen had mentioned were given by Professor Martin Stein, to where from there she goes on to talk about the people who had tampered with time, like Extant from 0 Hour, Gog, Barry Allen, Demios, and Dr. Manhattan. And to Bonnie, all of these examples, in their attempts to rewrite history, they had threatened time on a crisis level scale. But unlike the crisis that happened in the Omniverse, where the sky turns red for all to see, the crisis that threaten hypertime, they're hidden to the everyday world. And with saying this, Bonnie sends a message out to anyone who's watching, telling them that ultimately this is a lesson to us all. You must accept your life as it is, because trying to change your past or trying to control the future only leads to destruction. And when she says this, Mr. Terrific, he's more or less like, well, how do you know all that? And she tells Mr. Terrific, well, you're the 3rd smartest man on Earth, but I'm the smartest woman. To where from there, she gets a message from Geoff and she disappears before Mr. Terrific can get a word back in. But I believe this is what takes Bonnie and Geoff into what we'd seen at the end of Flashpoint Beyond issue 3, when at the time we had just picked up with the two of them in hypertime. But from here we then jump over to Bruce, who's made his way to visit Ra's al Ghul, which in a way is supposed to be a bit of a surprise reveal for anyone who's been following Damien's story, but at the same time it's Ra's al Ghul, so it's really not a surprise to see him back. But with us seeing Bruce meet with Ra's here, this takes us back before issue 0. As soon as he gets there, Ra's slams this urn on the table and he tells Bruce that this is your father's ashes after he was shot by Darkseid's Omega beams. And Ra's lets Bruce know that he read Korvac's journal, which he found in the Batcave, and from there he continued to do his research elsewhere, and he lets Bruce know that Bruce can still save his father, but he doesn't have much time to do it. And his hero Ra's gives Bruce confidential files he had dug up on the Time Masters, as well as information on Marionette and Mime, and it's from here where Bruce gathers all this information and begins his pursuit to save Flashpoint Thomas Wayne, which again from here leads into the events of issue 0. But after this, we jump back to the Flashpoint universe, just after where we left off when we found that Thomas Wayne had figured it out, that his wife, Martha Wayne, the Joker, is the Clockwork Killer. And at this point, he realizes that this entire time, Martha had just been distracting him so she can make her rounds and kill anybody who could change time. And once again, much like before, we find Thomas mad at himself because he knows Prime Earth Bruce would have figured this out at the first murder. But while he's thinking this and obsessing over it, Cobblepot calls out to him 4 times before he gets his attention. And the first thing that he tells Thomas is that he's got to get to Dexter because the kid went to Arkham to break out his mom and Thomas has got to keep the kid safe. But yet again, Thomas is like, none of that matters, because again, he's hell-bent on erasing this reality, and as far as he's concerned, only Martha matters, because Thomas needs to figure out how is she alive, how did she learn about any of this, and what does she want out of this when it's said and done. But as Thomas is racing to get to Martha, Cobblepot tells Thomas that he's read the sealed files on Gilda Dent, only to find out that Gilda Dent has 2 faces. She has a dark side, and she's done a lot of dirt that her husband, Judge Harvey Dent, has been covering up, and his hero Cobblepot tells Thomas that Dexter's sister did not kill herself. And really, this is something that goes back to Batman Night of Vengeance from 2011, which is what leads into this, because back then, Martha had kidnapped both of Harvey and Gilda's children, which led to a really messed up sequence of events, with Jim going after them by himself without telling Thomas, and with doing so he went in and he inadvertently shot Dexter's sister, Debbie, only for Martha to then show up and cut Jim's throat, which right there lets us know one of the reasons why Dexter is in extreme danger. And I mean, aside from the fact that his mom is jumping between identities at the moment as well too. But as we see Thomas arrive at Arkham and still very much set on the idea of getting to Martha more so than protecting Dexter. But when we jump back inside of Arkham, we find Martha telling Gilda Dent that there's a similarity between jokes and clocks, like set up a punchline, tick tock, tick tock. And as she continues, she goes on to tell this joke. And from the jump, Dexter's like, I don't want to hear this joke. Mom, we should go. But Martha goes on with saying how there once was this good man who fell in love with a girl. He vowed to always be there for her, for better and worse. They got married, they had a child, and then the worst showed up and it found us in a dark alley and it was holding a gun. And then the boy died. But as Martha is saying this, Gilda and Dexter, they're being backed out of the room and into the hallway, which almost looks like an alley while she's saying this. But from here, she continues to explain it and get to the punchline. She's then like none of it really matters, but before she can finish, she hears a noise and she looks to the window and she says the rest of it's gonna have to wait, cause daddy's home. And it's right then when Thomas Wayne comes crashing through the window. And as he does, within the shards of glass, we see a number of different moments from different stories, like Death in the Family, when Jason Todd had died, Three Jokers when one of the Jokers had died, and even Flashpoint issue 5 when Bruce had read the letter from Thomas Wayne. But in a way, with how this is done, it very much feels like this is a visual representation of Hypertime, where it's kind of reminding us of some of the things that Bonnie Baxter was talking about as far as Flashpoint and 0 Hour being our time crisis. And what says crisis more than us seeing reality getting shattered, or in this case, all of time, which is what's really at stake in the background here, according to both Corky and Bonnie Baxter. And I gotta say, for someone who's had enough of these crises over the years, you know, crisis, Jesus Christ. But I appreciate Flashpoint Beyond, though it slips into the time crisis category. It does so by following Thomas Wayne and being a detective / conspiracy theory type of story. And I appreciate that, because constantly jumping around and facing the end of the Omniverse, it gets repetitive after a while. But when Thomas Wayne jumps in here, he goes for Martha because he needs answers, and he's planning on ending the Flashpoint universe tonight, which is also why he's not as concerned about Dexter's safety, because again, in Thomas's mind, if he's successful, none of this matters. But while they're fighting, Gilda gets out of there with Dexter. And as we see them get in the elevator, she's hugging them tight, and I mean real tight. And to the point where Dexter's like, "Stop, Mom, it hurts." But with them leaving from here, we follow Thomas and Martha. And it's from here as we follow them where we start to get a bunch of huge reveals from Martha, because Thomas is exactly where she wanted him to be this whole time. But it's here where Thomas tosses Martha back into the room where Gilda was being held. And with security making their way there, Thomas goes in and he shuts the door, which buys them a little time because these doors weren't exactly designed to keep people out. But when Thomas shuts the door, first thing he asks Martha to explain is how she's still alive. And it's from here where Martha gets to spilling all the information about how she's still here, as well as the things that she learned through Psycho Pirate by torturing him before she killed him. But while they're in here, she leads Thomas behind the wall, which, like we've seen, this is how she's been getting in and out of Arkham. And she lets Thomas know that Psycho Pirate had told her how this world changed from what it should be, how Bruce became Batman and not Thomas, and the Joker. Psycho Pirate told Martha Wayne the Joker's real name, which is Jack Oswald White. And when she discovered this, she immediately went to go see the Jack Oswald White of the Flashpoint universe, just out of curiosity. And as it turns out, he's a failed comedian with a wife and a child who works at the Wayne Casino cleaning bathrooms. And Martha tells Thomas that when she saw them, they were a happy family, happier than Thomas and Martha ever were. And it's here where she lets Thomas know that she'd let them live. And on top of that, she even made sure that Jack wasn't at the Wayne Casino when it was destroyed. But with us seeing this and getting the Joker's actual name, and that name being Jack Oswald White, and I gotta admit, Oswald, it's an interesting choice for a middle name. But with us getting this reveal here, as well as us getting the additional story of Martha going to see the Jack of the Flashpoint universe, this reminds me a lot of the conclusion that we'd seen in Three Jokers, when Bruce went to go see the Joker's family, and we had seen Bruce tell Alfred that he had already known the Joker's real name, but no one else can know it because so many people are gonna come looking for them. And it's like, man, now that Martha knows, and Thomas knows, I can only imagine where Jeff Johns is gonna take it next. But after Martha tells all of this to Thomas, she tells him that seeing this made her angry, so she just stabs him from behind, causing him to stumble and fall through the broken floor into the abandoned sublevels where she's been this whole time. And it's from here where Martha tells Thomas about what appeared to be her death at the conclusion of Batman Night of Vengeance. And she tells Thomas after he had left her for dead. She woke up and she found a stream that had led her out of the cave, which led her to the sewers, which had then led her here, under Arkham, where she had heard a voice from above saying that this world shouldn't be, which of course was the voice of Roger Hayden, Psycho Pirate, who also was attempting to hide from the events from Dark Crisis. And this is what led Martha to hunting down everyone who knew how to change the timeline, to where then she took everything that they knew, and after she got the information, she left a trail of bodies to keep Thomas busy, so she'd have enough time to assemble this time sphere so that her and Thomas can go back in time and make sure that they die so that Bruce can live, and all it'll cost is one universe. But as we see Martha making this offer to Thomas, on the other side of this split, we're shown Prime Earth with Bruce and Corky Baxter, with the two of them seeing the snow globe go even crazier at this point. But now they're quickly met by the arrival of Rip Hunter, who just shows up standing in his iconic stance. And when he gets here, there's a bit of a stare-off between him and Bruce, because he tells Bruce, "You know why I'm here." And Bruce stares back saying, "I will not let you interfere." And with it ending this way, you already know, it's about to go down. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below, so we can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.